We begin with a high-stakes diplomatic gamble that stretched 5 hours inside the Kremlin, but still failed to unlock a path to peace. The war in Ukraine, now the deadliest conflict Europe has seen in generations, remains stuck on the same hard question that has haunted every negotiation so far: territory. On Tuesday, President Trump's senior envoy Steve Witkoff and his son-in-law Jared Kushner sat down with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow. Their mission was clear: somehow move Putin to a position of agreement on a revised peace plan. Now, the meeting had structure and substance, but did it have Putin's sign-off?
The conversation was very useful, constructive, and very meaningful. It lasted not for 5 minutes, but for 5 hours.
President Putin's foreign policy advisor, Yuri Ushakov, revealed that the original American proposal had 4 major components, all of which were examined during the talks. Some points, he said, drew agreement, while others triggered what he described as a critical, even negative response from President Putin.
Naturally, we discussed with U.S. colleagues the content of those drafts, those documents which the Americans submitted to Moscow some time ago. We went through these documents. We did not discuss any specific formulas, any specific American proposals. We discussed the essence of what was there in those American documents. We could agree with certain things, and the President Putin confirmed this to his interlocutors. We criticized some things, and the President did not hide our critical, even negative attitude to a number of proposals.
And on the centerpiece issue of territorial control, Ushakov said no compromise has been made yet. Russia continues to insist that the entire Donbas region must come under its control, either through negotiation or force. Ukraine, however, firmly rejects this, saying that the U.S. delegation at Ushakov laid out new ideas, but the Kremlin held its ground. Ushakov stressed that all the details of the meeting will remain confidential.
We agreed with our U.S. colleagues that we would not disclose the substance of the negotiations that took place. This is quite logical, as the negotiations were absolutely confidential and closed to the public. As I know, our U.S. colleagues went to the U.S. Embassy, where they will report to Washington. Then they will go to Washington and report in person to President Trump on what they discussed with President Putin in the Kremlin.
A day later, the Kremlin said that Russia is ready to hold as many talks with America as possible. And Secretary of State Marco Rubio hit a more optimistic note, saying that the talks had made some progress. Meanwhile, President Trump himself, speaking at a cabinet meeting, called the war a mess that defies easy solutions.
Settled 8 wars. This would be the 9th, and our people are over in Russia right now to see if we can get it settled. Not an easy situation, let me tell you. What a mess. It's a war that never would have happened if I were president. Not even a chance. And it didn't happen for 4 years.
Now, just hours before the meeting, Putin delivered a stark warning to NATO capitals, accusing European nations of blocking peace efforts, and said certain European demands were unacceptable to Russia. He then added that Russia is ready for war with NATO countries if Europe wants to start it. Putin didn't specify which demands he was referring to, however.
We are not planning to fight Europe. I have said this 100 times. But if Europe suddenly decides to wage war against us and starts it, we are ready right now. There can be no doubt about that. The question is, if Europe starts a war with us, I believe that very quickly. This is not Ukraine. With Ukraine, we act in a surgical, careful way. You understand, right? It is not war in the full modern sense of the word. If Europe chooses to start a war, the situation can very quickly reach a point where there will be no one left for us to negotiate with.
Now, in recent weeks, several European governments have pushed back and hard against the original U.S. plan, arguing it gave too many concessions to Russia. French President Emmanuel Macron reached China today, seeking to put pressure on President Xi Jinping to help secure a ceasefire in Ukraine. Also today, the European Union even agreed to ban imports of Russian gas by 2027, a decision that the Kremlin has strongly condemned. NATO countries have also pledged to buy hundreds of millions more and weapons for Ukraine amid Kyiv's intense lobbying for those military machinations. President Zelensky has also reiterated that peace negotiations cannot take place without Europe.
The territorial issue is the most difficult. The issues of money and reconstruction, in my view, and I am speaking honestly and we have discussed this, are of course hard to finalize without the presence of our European partners, because the money is in Europe. To me, this does not seem entirely fair. And the issue of security guarantees is also crucial. We need concrete commitments from the United States and concrete commitments from Europe.
Now, Zelensky also stated that Ukrainian negotiators will hold talks with EU leaders in Brussels before preparing for a meeting with President Trump's envoy.
I spoke with Steve yesterday and with him and with all his team, and we spoke. I think I already answered on your question that we are waiting for the results in America-Russia negotiations, today's results, and I will react according to the results.
Now, this position leaves negotiators trapped between two irreconcilable positions. So after 5 hours in the Kremlin and a week of back and forth, one reality remains. Ending this war will require a breakthrough neither side is ready to make, at least not yet.
I rose from the army with medals on my chest. I spoke of freedom from colonial chains, but I tightened my own. I filled prisons with ghosts. Nearly 500,000 people were butchered under my rule, and I trusted only my paranoia. I gave myself grand titles. I claimed to be Africa's strongman. History calls me something else, the dictator. Who am I?